What if I told you that the scariest horror movie villain you ever saw wasn't invented by Hollywood? What if the monster behind your favorite nightmare was actually real and lived in a town where people left their doors unlocked? Right now, somewhere near you, there might be a neighbor you wave to every morning, someone quiet, someone helpful, someone who seems completely normal. But how well do you actually know them? Because the story I'm about to tell you happened in a place exactly like yours, a peaceful town where everyone trusted everyone, until the day they discovered what was hiding in plain sight. Here's what they don't tell you about evil. It doesn't always announce itself. It doesn't wear a mask or carry a weapon. Sometimes it smiles at you in the grocery store. Sometimes it helps you carry your bags. Sometimes it lives next door for decades, and you never suspect a thing. This is the true story of Ed Gein, the man who inspired Psycho, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and The Silence of the Lambs. Three of the biggest horror films ever made, all based on one person. But here's the twist. Ed wasn't some criminal mastermind. He wasn't plotting in the shadows. He was just there. Quiet, polite, forgettable. And that's exactly what made him so dangerous. Our story takes place in Plainfield, Wisconsin, a town so small you could walk from one end to the other in 20 minutes. Population, maybe a few hundred people. The kind of place where everyone knows your name, where neighbors borrow sugar without asking, where nothing exciting ever happens. It was 1957. America was building suburbs, watching television, living the dream. Plainfield was the picture of safety. White picket fences, unlocked doors, children playing outside until dark. Crime. That happened in big cities, not here. But living among these innocent people was a man who would change everything they believed about safety, about trust, about the person living next door. Ed Gein was born in 1906, and from the very beginning his life was suffocating. His father was an alcoholic, angry, distant, barely present. But that wasn't the problem. The real force that shaped Ed's entire existence was his mother, Augusta. Augusta Gein wasn't just strict. She was a religious fanatic who believed the entire world was drowning in sin. She saw evil everywhere, especially in women. She told Ed that all women except her were corrupt, that the outside world would destroy him, that only she could keep him safe. Think about that for a second. Imagine growing up hearing every single day that you can't trust anyone, that everyone is dangerous, that your mother is the only good person on earth. No friends, no school activities, no normal childhood experiences. Just you, locked in a house, listening to sermons about how evil humanity is. Ed wasn't allowed to have friends. He couldn't go to birthday parties or play with other kids. His mother controlled every aspect of his life. What he ate, what he wore, what he thought. She didn't raise a son. She created a prisoner who believed the walls around him were protection, not a cage. His father died when Ed was young, but it barely mattered. He was never really there anyway. Ed's older brother tried to escape this toxic environment, tried to live a normal life. But then, during a fire on their property, the brother mysteriously died. Some people whispered that Ed might have been involved, but nothing was ever proven. And then it was just Ed and Augusta, alone on their isolated farm, surrounded by empty fields and silence. Augusta died in 1945. For most people, losing a parent is devastating, but eventually, life continues. You grieve, you heal, you move forward. But Ed completely fell apart, because Augusta wasn't just his mother. She was his entire world. She was the only person he ever talked to, the only voice he ever heard, the only human connection he ever had. When she died, Ed didn't just lose a parent. He lost his reality. He sealed off her bedroom exactly as she left it, her clothes hanging in the closet, her bed perfectly made, everything frozen in time like a museum. He would sit outside that locked door for hours, just staring at it, remembering. But here's where things get disturbing. The rest of the farmhouse, the rest of his world, started changing into something nobody could imagine. Ed lived alone on that remote property, miles from the nearest neighbor. During the day, people would occasionally see him in town. He'd buy supplies, chat with shopkeepers, help elderly neighbors with repairs. Everyone described him the same way: shy, quiet, polite, maybe a little odd, but harmless. Nobody knew that Ed's mind was unraveling. Nobody knew that his loneliness was turning into something twisted. Nobody knew that late at night, Ed was reading anatomy books, studying obituaries, visiting cemeteries under the cover of darkness. He became obsessed with death, not in a violent way, but in a desperate, broken way. He missed his mother so badly that he started believing he could somehow bring her back, or at least recreate her. And that's when Ed started doing things that would eventually shock the entire world. For years, strange things happened around Plainfield. A woman named Mary Hogan disappeared from the tavern she owned in 1954. No body, no evidence, no answers. People talked about it for a while, then life moved on. In a small town, you can't dwell on tragedy forever. Then, in November 1957, another woman vanished. Bernice Warden ran the local hardware store, a friendly woman everyone knew and liked. One morning, she simply wasn't there. The store was locked from the inside. The cash register was gone. There was a small amount of blood on the floor. Her son, a deputy sheriff, immediately knew something was horribly wrong. He checked the store's receipt book, and there, written in his mother's handwriting, was a name: Ed Gein. Ed had been in the store the day before, asking about antifreeze. Police drove out to Ed's farm thinking this would be routine. Maybe Ed saw something, maybe he could help with information. They weren't expecting to solve a murder. They definitely weren't expecting what they were about to find. When they arrived, Ed wasn't home. The house looked abandoned, dirty windows, peeling paint, surrounded by junk and old farm equipment. Officers walked around back to check a shed, and one of them pushed open the door. What he saw made him stumble backward and vomit. Hanging from the ceiling was a human body, decapitated, gutted like a hunting deer. At first, they thought it was an animal, but it wasn't. Officers rushed into the main house, and what they discovered inside became one of the most infamous crime scenes in American history. I'm not going to describe everything in graphic detail. Some things are too disturbing. But here's what you need to understand. Ed had turned his home into something that defied belief. He had created furniture and household items from human remains. Bowls made from skulls, chairs upholstered with human skin, masks made from faces, clothing made from body parts. It was like walking into a nightmare that someone had built, piece by piece, over many years. Police found evidence connecting Ed to multiple disappearances. Remains from at least 15 different people were identified. Some came from graves he had robbed. Some came from victims he had killed. When officers finally found Ed and brought him in for questioning, he didn't run. He didn't fight. He didn't even seem particularly upset. He confessed to everything in a quiet, almost childlike voice, as if he were describing a hobby, not horrific crimes. He admitted to killing Bernice Warden. He admitted to killing Mary Hogan years earlier. He admitted to robbing graves and bringing remains back to his farmhouse. But here's what disturbed investigators most. Ed didn't seem to understand why people were so horrified. In his mind, he wasn't doing anything evil. He was trying to recreate his mother, trying to fill the unbearable loneliness that had consumed him since her death. He wasn't driven by rage or hatred like typical killers. He was driven by grief and obsession that had twisted his already damaged mind into something unrecognizable. When Ed Gein's case went to trial, the courtroom wasn't filled with the usual anger or demands for justice. Instead, there was something heavier, a deep, uncomfortable silence, because everyone was asking the same question. How did nobody notice? How did this man live among them for years, shop in their stores, attend their churches, help their neighbors, and hide something so unimaginable? How did evil exist so quietly in a place where everyone thought they knew everyone? Psychiatrists examined Ed extensively. Their conclusion? He was legally insane. He wasn't faking it. He genuinely didn't live in the same reality as everyone else. His mind had been so warped by isolation, abuse, and his mother's fanatical control that he never developed a normal understanding of right and wrong, life and death, human and object. Ed wasn't sentenced to death. He was committed to a mental institution where he spent the rest of his life. And here's something that disturbed people even more. In the hospital, Ed was reportedly peaceful, almost content. He read books, created art, talked politely with staff. It was as if being in a structured environment, being told what to do every day, actually made him feel safe again, like when his mother controlled everything. The monster that terrified America became a quiet patient who painted pictures and smiled at nurses. Ed Gein died in 1984 at 77 years old. Plainfield tried desperately to move on, to forget, to return to normal. But they couldn't. The world wouldn't let them. Because while Plainfield wanted to forget, Hollywood was taking notes. Alfred Hitchcock read about Ed Gein and created Norman Bates, the shy motel owner with mother issues in Psycho. The filmmakers behind the Texas Chainsaw Massacre studied Ed's crimes and built Leatherface, the killer who wore human skin. Thomas Harris researched Ed Gein while writing The Silence of the Lambs and created Buffalo Bill, the murderer who wanted to transform himself using his victims. Three of the most iconic horror villains in cinema history, all inspired by one quiet farmer from Wisconsin. The difference? In the movies, you know who the monster is. In real life, Ed Gein was the neighbor nobody feared. Today, if you visit Plainfield, it looks completely ordinary. Kids ride bikes, people shop at stores, life continues. But if you talk to older residents, some still remember. And when they do, their voices get quieter, and they say the same thing. We thought we knew him. That's the part that still haunts people. Not the crimes themselves, but the realization that evil doesn't always look like evil. It can be polite, it can be helpful, it can wave at you every morning for 20 years, and you'll never know what's behind the smile. So here's the question that this story leaves us with, and it's the question that keeps people awake at night. What's more terrifying? A monster hiding in the shadows, or a monster hiding in plain sight? Because Ed Gein proved something that changed how we think about danger. Evil doesn't always announce itself with horror movie music and dark clothing. Sometimes evil is quiet. Sometimes it's polite. Sometimes it's the person you least suspect. And maybe that's why his story still matters today. Not because of what he did, but because of what he represents. The darkness that can exist behind the most normal-looking door. The danger that can hide behind the friendliest smile. Evil doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. And those whispers, those quiet, unnoticed moments, are what turned Ed Gein from a forgotten farmer into a legend that Hollywood will never stop retelling. If this story made you rethink everything you thought you knew about the person next door, hit subscribe because next video case will disturb you even more.